Welcome to 10 Minute Climate, the podcast brought to you by Beaverbrook Energy. Join Max.
Hi, I'm Max.
And Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony.
Who between them have got over 70 years of experience in the energy industry, and they're here to share it with you. It's everything you need to know, delivered in just 10 minutes.
Lack of understanding about how energy impacts on people's businesses, I think, is a very relevant factor. Years ago, people were considered to be an overhead in a business. You had employees and that was it. And if you had no work, you didn't have employees. Now you have them managed through HR systems in great detail. You know that Bob in Sunderland has 2 weeks holiday and he's got a wife and 2 kids and he lives here and he has this problem and he's done that and whatever, down to ultimate detail. Standing next to Bob is the HVAC unit, which no one has a clue.
HVAC unit?
Heating, ventilation and air conditioning. So something that consumes energy. Just think of it as an energy consumer. No one has a clue what it costs on an individual basis.
Or when it's running.
When it's running or whatever. So they don't understand how to manage it. Now, this is due to the fact that gradually things like HR and transport and things have almost got to the point where lots of businesses outsource them to somebody else. I suppose the big example that would probably impact that most people understand is IT. All the time IT consisted of a telephone on somebody's desk. Companies handled it and then they had a switchboard and then they got one of them computer things in the office and it started to become complicated enough that they were willing to hand over the reins to a specialist organisation.
But let's get back to I feel like the HR analogy that people just never really managed it properly. You didn't have the proper systems, and now it is managed in a much more sophisticated way. And okay, whether or not you like 0 hours contracts or flexible working, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
It's done in that way. It's sophisticated. Whereas energy is just kind of ignored. It is the cost it is, and we pay it, and that's it. I remember once I was working with a big industrial manufacturer up in Scotland, and about 30% of their cost was energy. And we went to them and said, look, we can save you energy by building a biomass plant and we do it on your site and it'll be low carbon, all this kind of stuff. And they said, well, that's great, but we don't really understand energy. I was like, what? It's 30% of your cost. And they said, yeah, we have a wire, we have a pipe, and once a year we fix a price, and that's it. And the stuff we do understand, the stuff we buy, the production, the stuff, we manage that. But energy, just forget it. And that was about 15 years ago. And I think nothing's really changed. It's just this kind of mandated cost. It happens and you deal with it. And there's a maybe it's a fear. I don't really know.
So do the energy costs come down the mountain on a tablet of stone and they just, as it so it is written, shall be your energy cost? I've come across an industrial process site where they know exactly in detail how much energy they're using and what their costs are, but not what they're using it on. So they've got about 6 processes, make 6 different products on site, have no idea of how they apportion cost. They could, in theory, be manufacturing one of those products at a loss because its energy consumption is higher than the profit.
And they have no idea.
No idea at all.
Yeah.
And that's typical.
But I think that's where it starts with business energy is knowledge. And it starts with proper data.
Yes.
Where are you using it? When are you using it? People don't know. Very few businesses have got systems for that.
Even just boiling down to the simplest denominators, is the energy lighting things, heating things, or moving things, like doing a process? You know, are you shifting stuff around with it? They don't even know whether it's worth switching the lights off or not.
And it's actually, there was an interesting EY study from FDs. And I think they found more than half of FDs, this was a global survey, didn't trust their own carbon numbers, their own business's carbon numbers. They weren't willing to say it was done properly. There's a real lack of information. I think that's where it starts, information. Then it can go into, once you've got the information, you can manage it and you can make the kind of investments. We talked about before, the investments you need to make in energy, they can be quite big. I mean, it's often, it's hardware, it's solar, it's different generation systems. It can be, a whole lot of light bulbs, whatever. But these are quite big investments with payback periods over long periods of time. And if you're not thinking about energy, you're not going to do it. If you haven't got the data, you don't know why you would do it. You've got to do that.
But that's a step, isn't it? Because the thing is, you can't see your energy. You have to put something in place to measure it. And most businesses will have the fiscal meter, so the meter you actually pay your bill on at the gate. And then lots of things coming into the business, whether they be gas lines or electricity lines or whatever, and nobody knows where it goes and they don't know what they're using it on. So you're always guessing as to where you could change your life. And one of the things that I've done in my life is develop systems where you could go into businesses and start measuring. But the accountants are always, what do you mean you want to spend £20,000 on metering? So, well, you've got £100,000 a month energy bill, and I would like to tell you for 2% of your energy bill something about where it's going.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we can go into a bit of an advert for Beaverbrook Energy now,
Yeah.
What we do, energy architecture, is we actually look at it properly and we say, where is your energy going? Let's look at the data, let's process it properly, and let's try and understand what investments you can make and what those returns are. And people just don't do it properly. And it's a missed opportunity. It can save people money. Whether it's enough money to get people to move fast enough is often an issue, but it is there.
Well, as long as to me, it's like, what is the smallest amount of money that the chief financial officer in a business is willing to add to his bottom line profit in a business? Because if you only spend £50,000 a year on lighting your building, but find out that half of that is being spent in a warehouse, which you demanned 10 years ago when you put an automatic picking system in, but you still got all the lights on. There's no people in there and the machines don't need light to work. So you're spending £25,000 a year, which if you multiply that through the business, you might have to do £500,000 worth of business to make £25,000.
Well, it's actually where we often see people wanting to make it is private equity, because private equity understand in terms of multiples, right? So if you own a business,
if you make it better, you multiply it up.
Yeah, £100,000 of extra profit because they want to sell the business within a few years might be worth 500 grand to $1 million or even two in some cases. So they get it. They're like, okay, right, we can invest this, save the money. It adds to the capital value. It's got to be somehow we have to get energy up the priority list, and it's really difficult.
And I think we've discussed it before. It's seen as complicated because it's not a core activity. The HR people have moved their way up from the pay office and the personnel manager to now you've got businesses have an HR director. It's implausible to me why you should have a business that has 20 or 30% of its costs that hasn't got an energy director sitting on the board making decisions about how the business operates, because they're responsible for more cost than anybody else.
It's funny. I guess the energy industry doesn't get up to that level. The guys dealing with energy are often, they're mid-level, they're often engineering trained, they're often on the older side. And they're just kind of stuck there, and they don't go any further. What they care about, I find, is reliability. Is the system going to work? Is the process going to work? Is the building operational?
Well, that's because they get a hard time. They get a hard time if the process stops. They get a hard time if the door closer on the toilets isn't working, right? And they tend to be covering that level of responsibility. What's really scary is in my past, one of my sins is I've been at executive level in one of the big six energy companies, and even the people at board level in those companies didn't understand energy.
Right.
They understood the accounting of energy, what you charged people and how the money came in and out, because they're basically energy traders is what they are. But they didn't understand energy, how it worked, because all their concern was as soon as it hit the meter and we got the money for it.
So what we're saying, there isn't the data, there isn't the understanding. It's actually, in many ways, it's an education gap more than anything else. Which is, I guess, why we're here. We're trying to talk about energy to educate people to say.
So when do we
it
start?
Doesn't matter.
Nursery?
Why not? Well, they do. I mean, it's a generational thing. It has been for the last. I mean, I was brought up in the 80s. I was told that oil was going to run out by like 2010 or something.
Yeah.
But it's beginning.
Peak oil. Whatever happened to him?
Yeah, but I went to my kid's school and I spoke about climate change. They're absolutely aware of it. They're absolutely, terrified in many ways. Perhaps it's gone too far, but there is a level of education around certainly climate change. But I think we need to include energy in that. People don't think about energy. Again, we talked about it before. 10 years ago, that survey in the UK that people only thought about their energy bills for 9 seconds a year. They need to think about it more. It happened post-Ukraine, as we always say, and now it goes back to nothing.
We've gone through this information flood over the last probably 10, 20 years, where there was a whole agenda, a political agenda about we don't believe in climate change and it's not happening and it's just normal cyclic and it's not happening, it's too late now. And they've suddenly gone to this switch, we can't solve it. Whereas you and I know there is a technical solution for every single problem that can be engineered on this planet right now dealing with energy. But we need the decision-making and the will. And I think we're right. I think companies are the people that are holding the baby.
So companies, it's fascinating. Companies can do it. It will save them money, but they just don't understand that they don't understand they can save money, and then they're confused by the technology, and that's the gap. It doesn't really need government to be taxing the hell out of carbon.
No, but you need to think about the personal issues of the people who are potentially making these decisions, because if you take someone too much out of their comfort zone in terms of their knowledge and understanding, they become irrelevant to the process. And very few turkeys vote for Christmas. So you've got to be careful how you put this across to people so that they understand we're here to support and help the whole of the energy transition industry, not just us. There's millions of us globally. We're here to make the world better, but we need them to engage.
Got to get the message across. I saw a business the other day run by a guy in his 30s, doing a lot of logistics, a lot of lorries. And he had 3 or 4 electric HGVs. I've not seen that in the UK. It was astonishing to see it. And he does it because he gets it, because he's of a generation that goes, yeah, of course we're going to have electric lorries. And of course I want to be doing my bit. But it's very rare to see owners or managers of businesses of that generation. I think as they get older, it'll become more natural.
We're not looking at a philanthropy play here. We're looking at solid business. The big warehouse beginning with A people do not have electric vans because they're tree huggers. They have electric vans because they make absolute commercial sense.
Yeah.
80% reduction in maintenance cost, lower cost per mile, more controllable, all etc. Blah de blah de blah. I just find it weird that perhaps the public need to be marching up and down the streets more, but it is a corporate issue. Do they need a nudge?
Yeah, they do. It's someone told me the other day, the way the media works at the moment is that the chairman reads the Telegraph, the chief executive reads the Times, and no one else reads anything at all, right? But it's there. When I send out my newsletter and I get the questions I get back, I get quite a lot of negative feedback. It's always the older generation.
Yeah.
And one guy the other day, he'd been very senior in an energy company and he knows about energy, and he emailed me saying, what about electric cars being too heavy for bridges? It's affecting the bridges in the UK. It's some talking point that was in the Telegraph a few months ago. It's like, dude.
Yeah, but the Telegraph since 1933.
Well, but it's also the weight of cars is related to the trend towards SUVs, right? Cars are getting heavier because of SUVs, not because of electric cars. And it just drives me crazy. People suck up this misinformation. Anyway, I think it's education, and that's what we've got to do more of. Luckily, we're doing a podcast on energy, so we're helping.
That's amazing.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. It really helps us grow and continue bringing you valuable content. If you're curious to learn more about Beaverbrook Energy and how we're navigating the future of energy, feel free to reach out to us directly. And for those looking for quick, actionable insights on the energy transition, be sure to subscribe to our 10-second climate newsletter, delivered every weekend with essential intelligence to help business leaders stay ahead of the curve. We appreciate you listening, and we look forward to having you join us again next time. Stay informed, stay engaged, and take care.